Okay. We got a couple more of these sessions that are really going to be devoted to the vocabulary of soul, this one and the next one. Uh, Today, well, for those of you who are new and maybe who have forgotten this, you don't have a soul. You are a soul. That's kind of a public service announcement I like to make. What that means, we're trying to understand in all these months. What does it mean to be a soul? Okay. Today's talk is going to piggyback off of Jill's talk last week, which I thought was fantastic. I appreciate that talk a lot. And it was her title was "Love is a Force," which is trying to jar us a little bit because we get little boxes and concepts of things, and most people think love is a feeling. Well, there is feeling involved, but it's much bigger than that. And she was saying love is a force, and I'm going to go further in that today and try to deepen that. Today's talk, at least now, if I were going to title, I always have to send a title to Jared when he posts it up on YouTube. I will call today's talk the title, What You Love is What You Become. What you love is what you become. 7 words, but worth meditating on it. What you love is what you become. This force of love can go in a lot of different directions. And so I'm going to talk about the whoops, not that one. We're going to talk about just the evolution, how love actually evolves. It's not a static thing at all. It is a force. But as you know, force, just even in the physical sense, a force can be used for the common good and for good or for ill. And so I want you to actually understand this force a little bit more. And, we're in one of the strongest forces is on the planet is the magnetic field. And love is part of that. Love is a magnetic force. Magnet means we're drawn to things. And so I want to try to break that down a little bit on our way to the inner Machu Picchu, the inner connection to the ultimate force. Well, I'm going to just go through 3 of the main names of love by the Greeks. The Greeks have 8 or 9 of them, depending on which list you look at. And some of them are, the Greek word for flirting, Flirting is a kind of attraction. It is a kind of trying to, but we're going to talk about the main ones. And those would be 3. The 3 would be eros, E-R-O-S, philos, P-H-I-L-O-S, which philosophy comes from. Eros, eroticism comes from. Erotic comes from that, from eros. And agape. That would be sort of the line of from the least force to the greatest force, eros to philos to agape. Okay, and so I'm going to run through each of those a little bit just to give you a sense of it. Eros is actually the what we're born into as children, and that's what I've called before the childhood operating system. It's a bodily, it's a really strictly a bodily based form. We don't have higher thinking, or we have very little of that, and so it's really body based. And the key to Eros is it's attracted to pleasure, and it's averse to pain, which makes a lot of sense when we're a little kid. It's a simple choice. You try to go towards the pleasurable and avoid the pain at all cost. Okay, and that's not bad. That's survival gear. That's why sometimes I call this a survival operating system, the childhood operating system. And when you're hungry, you cry, and then mommy might pick you up and feed you even. There's all kinds of things we need. We need to be fed. We need to be changed, cleaned. We need to be held. just the feeling of being held like we were held in the womb, you see, by this very kind of holding space. We need to be held, all those things. And we don't need to, I have one really, she's still a great friend. She's a sister from out at Mount St. Joseph in Owensboro, a great spiritual director. She was a 4 in the Enneagram, and she was the last of like 8 children to this Irish Catholic family. And by that time, her mother was worn out, had her hands full, and so, and she was this, and she would be put in like one of those things called that should have the netting, a little playpen. She'd put in a playpen, and she could remember throwing herself against the mesh of the playpen and screaming for hours. Finally, her mother would pick her up. Well, if she wasn't a 4 before that, she certainly was a bigger 4 after that, because you just want to get what you need, and you're willing to scream about it. Okay, so this is the childhood operating system, Eros, and it's just the reason I'm married now for over 50 years to Pam is because, well, I was attracted to her. There was that thing. Now, long time marriages don't always start at that level, but we were high school kids, and that's the prime territory there. Still kids, really, still children. So that's that. Now, the thing about Eros is it's the most restrictive kind of love. It's got the narrowest aperture. I didn't date a bunch of other girls. My eyes fixed on this girl. So it's the most restrictive kind of aperture or opening for love, and it's also the most reactive. That's the important thing to get, the most emotionally reactive. So most restrictive, most reactive, attracted to pleasure, averse to pain. But good. It's still a form of love. Still a form of love. It's okay to love pasta primavera. I do. It's not wrong. Be attracted to good food. It's not wrong. It's a form of love. Now the second form of love of called philos, for where philosophy comes from, and there's in that in the Sophie part is the wisdom. So. The wisdom of philosophy. It's a kind of it's what I call the strategic operating system. It's more sophisticated. It's still and this is one of the things about evolution as you go through forms and that evolve. You transcend the lower form, but you take with you all the helpful stuff of it. Okay, and you leave the stuff that's getting in the way. Unfortunately, we don't all do that. Well, some people don't even evolve. They're stuck at the lower level or at this level or that level. And there's more than 3 levels to most evolution. It's very subtle, but I'm just breaking it down for you. So for Philos, it's a strategic because we have a mind developed which has reason, which can look at options and things like that. Now this is attracted to sharing with others. And you could go to a kindergarten class and you can see, what do they teach them? Is you got to share those toys. You can share with this kid. No, mine. It's like we all start out as little golems. My precious, my precious, my precious. And so this is a less restrictive, less reactive thing, and you learn how to share with others. And you actually that sort of is the growing thing of love as we're heading towards this idea of there is somebody else but me. There's certain infamous politicians who have no idea that there's anybody in the universe besides himself. That's what you call narcissism. Okay. And so as you grow and love evolves, it becomes more stronger because it's magnified. Well, hey, we can share, we can do some things. We could build a city, we could build a community. This community has a lot of that energy in it. People come because they like to be in the community, and not everybody likes the third part where we share. Some people they log off and they don't mind telling me. Well, that's okay, but this is what they're not ready for that. They're not attuned to that yet. So less restrictive, less reactive. And this is more a mental thing where Eros is a bodily reaction. This can be more of a intellectual, rational choice. It's hard to think that you even have choice when you're just in Eros. It's just, the rats take the cocaine every time, and they'll take cocaine until it kills them. That's Eros. Okay. So this is strategic, less reactive, less restrictive. So wider appetite. There's somebody other than you and your appetites, you see. And so then that can evolve to agape. Interesting Greek word. Okay. Now that's what I call the sacred operating system. So we're evolving from um, just a survival operating system to a strategic operating system, includes more people, can be more for the, if you're just operating on your own, you can't do much for other people. But then if you're operating with other people included, and yeah, okay, then we can do something. Then the common good really exists. And then finally, agape is a sacred operating system. It's attracted to the sacred and to the aspect of the sacred, which is wholeness. One of the drawbacks of the first two operating systems is it's not a sense of wholeness. In the primitive operating system, survival, there's just me, and then the guys I can get survival for me, and then let's think about other people in the strategic thing. But still, there's a sense of other, say, which is good because it's a little bigger than you, but it's still other. In other words, they're separate. Well, when you get to the force of this kind of love, uh, it's attracted to the sacred and to a sense of wholeness. And this is wide open. The aperture is wide open. This is a wide angle lens. And this is connected with the heart, what the contemplative traditions, many of them call the heart. So we have body, mind, and heart. And this heart would include all would transcend. It has to transcend because it's about being in love with the sacred. So it transcends everything, but includes everything. So the body is part of it, the mind is part of it, but in agape, it's primarily the heart, the organ that includes everything else. Yeah, and what we've been calling soul is that whole consciousness of body, mind, and heart, but with the uh, just the helpful parts of both body and mind, and then what the heart has to add. We'll talk a little bit more about the heart next time for our last talk on soul. So we got that picture. Okay, now go back a couple millennium to the West Bank, uh, in the where the Palestinian Authority rules, and you got the birth of a guy who was trying to teach about this to people who are at these lower levels, and when they tried to corner this Palestinian Jew named Jesus. They tried to corner him, and the Pharisees, who were the legal eagles of the Jewish temple system, they said, well, what do you think the greatest commandment is? And then Jesus' answer was essentially agape, which is not one of the 10 commandments that they knew. He said, well, it's love God with your whole heart, soul, mind, body, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, it's from those other lower forms. It's a little hard to understand that. Certainly from their Eros thing, that doesn't make any sense. But then he even went further because one of the lawyers said, "Well, who is my neighbor anyway?" And Jesus totally blew their minds when he basically said, "Your enemies, loving your enemies," because he spun out one of his greatest parables, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Samaritans, interestingly enough, were enemies of the Jews. Jews would go miles out of their way to avoid even touching the dirt in what was called Samaria. These were the ancient ancestors of the Palestinians, people we call the Palestinians now. It was all called Palestine from when the British took it over from the Ottoman Empire, Palestine Protectorate. And so all this was called Palestine at one time. So and that the hero of that one is not a it's not a Jew, and it's not a. We don't know what the religion of the guy in the ditch was, which is masterful. We don't know who he was, but the priest and everybody walked past him, but the Samaritan stopped and took care of him and actually helped him recover. And that's got to be that was shocking at the time. It's shocking now because that's he's saying you even this love extends even to your enemies, and as a matter of fact, that's the test of it because well, and this is a non-dual teaching. That was the problem still to this day with Christianity, with these people who tried to formalize this thing. They missed the big picture, and the big picture is really this: it's agape. It's your love of the sacred, and because of that, you love your neighbor as yourself, not like yourself, but that your neighbor is yourself. And let's go a little further. The person you consider your enemy, you gotta love him or her or them. Well, that's challenging. It's challenging today. People don't buy that today. Christians don't buy that today. Enemy formation is politics, isn't it? What passes for politics? Not the common good. This is the ultimate common good. So it's about 1,300 years after Jesus, probably the person who most encapsulates this in my mind, it was Rumi, who was a Sufi. The Sufis in his tradition, they knew Jesus was one of them because Rumi said, "Well, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not Zen, I'm not a Christian, I'm not Buddhist, I'm not any of that." He said, "My religion is love." And here's Rumi's favorite. Here's my favorite poem of Rumi, and it's one of the most powerful. He said, because he's going beyond the other two operating system. He says out beyond, and he's talking about the second operating system here of Philos, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing. There's a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul, I mean, Rumi had an incredible theology of soul. He said, when the soul lies down in that grass, in that field, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense when you're in this field, this unified field of love. There is no other. One of the first Zen guys that came into America in the late 50s was D.T. Suzuki, who was a scholar, and he was talking about Zen and enlightenment and whatever. And there was a fair amount of other, not just Buddhists there. There were hardly any Buddhists in America, only a few, but there was a lot of Christian missionaries and theologians there. And one theologian said, "Well, you're talking about all this enlightenment stuff, but what about the other?" So that's a question from that second energy level, philosophical level. What about the other? And then, but Suzuki was coming from that third level. He said, well, for the man of Zen, there is no other. No, he's not saying it was, just you and that's be back into narcissism. He was talking about that third level that Jesus was on. There was no other. And we're all in this wholeness together as the Aramaic, my teacher who was so helpful in Aramaic, Neil Douglas Klotz, he translated that interesting line where he said, be perfect. In English, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. He translated it, said, be whole as the universe is whole. That got me, boy, I wish I had read that about 30 years earlier, encountered that. But it really changed me. Be whole as the universe is whole. That is the level of agape. And that was the level Jesus was teaching at. And he was teaching it to people who were on the eros level or even the philos level. Philos level could maybe make that leap, but So that's a look at how the force of love can evolve. Okay, and then the meditation, which we're going into in a minute or two, is the practice of allowing yourself to be drawn into contact with the spirit, actually meeting the spirit. That's why when we talk about prayer, we put the hands together in a lot of traditions, not just Christian. A lot of traditions, they put the hand together, and it's always usually somewhere in front of the heart, you see. This meeting, it's the essence of what heart to heart is about. Um, Eros doesn't primarily bring you here, Philos. And then what the real intention of heart to heart with the sacred itself, which the vibes go out to everybody, then you see. So that's really what we do in this second part. We go heart to heart with the sacred in the silence. Like Rumi says, uh, when when you lie down in this field, the world is too full to talk about. So there's silence. There's no talking in this part. We're going into the silence, into the stillness, to have this meeting. This is what the inner Machu Picchu is. This is what the inner kingdom is. Jesus was amazing. He said, not at the temple. They built a temple in all Jerusalem on a hill. That's that old thing, just like Machu Picchu and just like Moses on top of the mountain. And, they were going higher somehow to something that was transcendent. The weather, the seasons, all these things. They were trying to get closer to them, closer to the sacred. Well, Jesus reversed all that. He wasn't a churchgoer. Every time he was in the temple, he got in trouble. Every time, And so we made a churchy religion out of it. You can mess up anything. Humans can do that because they don't really get it, because this is a non-dual teaching, and this is what dualistic minds do. Well, there's sacred places and there's profane places. Well, Jesus hung out in the streets, in the houses. That's primarily where the ministry was. He wasn't. He did remarkable things, but you didn't have to go up the steps to the temple or up to Machu Picchu. He said, the kingdom of heaven is within you. It's among us, which means the vibes we all put out to each other is it, you see. Yeah. So I think that's good enough for the talk, Joe. And then we'll just get on to spending a little time with the spirit.